All right, let's open the case file on what might be one of the most shocking stories ever told. We're going to treat this less like an ancient play and more like what it really is, a gripping, absolutely tragic detective story. So, get this. How can a detective, a brilliant one at that, solve a murder only to find out the killer is himself? I mean, that's the wild, mind-bending question at the heart of this 2,500-year-old cold case. We're going to follow an investigation that kicks off with a massive citywide crisis and, well, it ends with a horrifying truth about the lead investigator himself. Okay, first up, a city's cursed case. See, this story doesn't start with a single crime scene. Nope. It starts with a full-blown catastrophe that's brought an entire city to its knees. So the city of Thebes, it's literally dying. A mysterious plague is just tearing through its people. We're talking total chaos. Crops are failing, babies are stillborn, people are just dying in the streets. And in their desperation, who do they turn to? The one guy they think can save them. Their king, Oedipus. This is the hero who already saved them once from the monstrous Sphinx. And Oedipus, he's a man of action. He immediately takes charge. He finds out from the oracle at Delphi that this whole plague thing, it's divine punishment for an old, unsolved crime, the murder of the last king, a guy named Laius. So Oedipus makes this huge public vow. He says, I will find the man who brought this curse upon us. I will not rest until the truth is brought to light and our city is saved. He's basically promising to find the killer and kick him out, no matter who it is. And that brings us to our next section, the detective on the trail. So, the manhunt is on. Oedipus, this great problem solver, he starts his investigation feeling totally confident. But here's the twist. Every single clue he finds doesn't point to some random bad guy. It points right back, deep into his own hidden past. Okay, so let's look at the investigator's backstory, because this is where things get really wild. It all starts with a prophecy. An oracle tells his parents, the king and queen of Thebes, that their son is going to kill his father and marry his mother. Yikes. So they try to get rid of him, leaving the infant to die with his ankles pierced, which, by the way, is what his name Oedipus means, swollen foot. But he's saved and adopted by the royal family in Corinth, so he grows up thinking he's the prince of Corinth, knowing nothing about his real parents. Then, he hears that same creepy prophecy, and, trying to be a good guy, he flees Corinth to protect the only parents he's ever known. On his journey, he gets into this, a road rage incident at a crossroads and ends up killing a stranger. He keeps going, solves the famous riddle of the Sphinx, and bam, he's crowned the new king of Thebes. What's so crazy is that every single step here is a logical choice he makes to escape his fate, but every single one pushes him right into its arm. All right, our third section, the suspect in the mirror. This is where the investigation really starts to unravel. Oedipus starts gathering evidence about the murder of the old king, Laius, and the details, they start to sound way too familiar. The whole thing takes a horrifying turn, and the evidence, well, it starts to point in a direction that seems completely impossible. So remember that stranger Oedipus killed at the crossroads? Well, a witness is brought in to talk about King Elias's murder, and he describes the scene. It happened at a three-way crossroads. The king was in a chariot, there was a big argument about who had the right of way. And for Oedipus, our lead detective, you can just imagine that first horrible piece of the puzzle just clicks right into place. Yeah? That man he killed in a fit of rage all those years ago, it wasn't just some random guy. It was King Laius. It was his father, the very man whose murder he swore he would solve. The detective realizes the criminal he's been hunting with all this passion is himself. And believe me, the nightmare is just getting started. So, wait a minute. What about the widowed queen he married after he became king? If Laius was his father, then the queen he married, the mother of his children. Oh no. That final, awful piece of the prophecy is just hanging there in the air, a truth so monstrous you can barely even think it. Queen Jocasta, his mother. And there it is, the whole thing. The case is solved. The prophecy is completely fulfilled. The hero who saved the city, the brilliant detective who promised to find the source of all the sickness, he is the sickness. So what happens now? Let's get to it. The devastating verdict. The truth is out in the open. For Oedipus and for his mother/wife Jocasta, there's no way out. There's no escaping the verdict that fate just handed down. And the aftermath? It is swift and it is brutal. Upon learning the full, horrible truth, Queen Jocasta takes her own life. She was the one telling Oedipus to just stop digging, to leave the past alone. She just couldn't bear the weight of it all. Overwhelmed by the shame, she hangs herself. So Oedipus finds her, and you'd think, okay, maybe he kills himself too, right? But he doesn't. Why? He actually chooses a punishment that he thinks is way, way worse than death, a sentence that perfectly fits his crime, which was being blind to a truth that was right in front of his face the whole time. So this is why he blinds himself. See, it's not just some random act of grief. It's a calculated, self-inflicted sentence. He felt his eyes, which saw the truth way too late, didn't deserve to see the light anymore. He also knew it was a punishment worse than death. He just couldn't stand the idea of looking at his own children, who were born from this sin, and he didn't want to have to face his parents in the afterlife with his sight. So he literally takes the pins from Jocasta's dress and, well, he stabs out his own eyes. He chooses to live in darkness. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit, because this story is so much more than just a shocking thriller. Why this case never closes. The reason we're still talking about this 2,500-year-old story is because it forces us to look at some of the biggest questions there are. Questions about fate, about knowledge, and really about who we are. At its core, this whole story is a clash between human reason and cruel fate. On one hand, you've got Oedipus. He is the peak of human intelligence. This is the guy who solved the Sphinx's riddle. He logically investigates this crime, and he truly believes he can outsmart destiny. But on the other hand, you have fate. And despite all his smarts, every single rational choice he makes to avoid the prophecy just ends up fulfilling it. You gotta remember, the playwright Sophocles wrote this when people in Athens were getting super confident about human intellect. This play was basically a warning against hubris, that dangerous arrogance of thinking you're smarter than fate itself. And in the end, it all comes down to this devastating realization from Oedipus himself. I was born from those I should not have been. I have lived with those I should not have, and I have killed those I should not have. Wow, that is his entire life summed up right there. He basically represents this terrifying journey from total ignorance to the most complete and completely devastating self-knowledge you can imagine. He finally knows exactly who he is, and that knowledge just destroys him. And that leaves us with this final, haunting question. Is a painful truth really better than a blissful ignorance? Think about it. Jocasta begged him to stop, to just live happily not knowing. But Oedipus, his whole personality was about solving problems, about finding the truth. He had to keep going, even when he knew it was leading somewhere awful. He chose to know the truth, even though it cost him literally everything. So I'll leave you with this. What would you choose?
Welcome to our Explainer, where we dig into the most powerful ideas and stories ever told. And today, we are tackling an absolute giant, Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. So let's just get right into it. How on earth does a 2,500-year-old story about killing your dad and marrying your mom become a masterpiece? On the surface, it's just shocking, right? It's a list of our worst taboos. But its influence is just undeniable. So today, we're going to figure out exactly why this ancient Greek tragedy still hits so hard.
So to really start to get our heads around this thing, we've got to begin with its most famous interpretation. And funny enough, it doesn't come from a literature professor, but from the world of psychology.
Right, Sigmund Freud. He reads this story and has this huge light bulb moment. For him, Oedipus isn't just some bizarre old myth. No, he argued it's actually a symbol for a universal desire buried deep down in all of us. It's basically the raw, messy drama of family life, just blown up to a mythic scale.
This also taps into something that's surprisingly common, a childhood fantasy that psychologists call the family romance. You know that feeling some kids get? That your parents can't possibly be your real parents, that you're secretly the lost child of a king and queen. Well, Oedipus tragically lives out that fantasy, but in this horrific reverse way. He finds out the royal family he tried to escape is his actual one.
Okay, but here's where it gets really wild. Freud doesn't just stop at the individual mind. He takes this one idea and expands it to explain the very foundation of human society itself. In his book Totem and Taboo, he makes this totally radical claim. He takes the famous line from the Bible, "In the beginning was the Word," and just flips it. He says civilization didn't start with a word or a law. Nope, it began with a crime, a terrible primal act. So he imagines this prehistoric scenario he calls the primal horde. Picture this. There's a dominant father figure, the big boss, who keeps all the women for himself. The sons, who are resentful, eventually gang up, kill him, and take the women. But afterwards, they're just crushed by this overwhelming guilt. And that guilt forces them to create rules to stop the whole group from just tearing itself apart. And not primal act of violence, and the guilt that followed. It's what gave birth to the two most fundamental rules in human culture. Don't murder your own people, and don't commit incest. And these two taboos, which are right at the very heart of the Oedipus story, are what Freud believed made family, community, and yeah, all of civilization even possible.
Okay, but this brings up a massive philosophical question, right? If these urges are so deep-seated and his terrible destiny was prophesied from the start, was Oedipus just a puppet? Was he just a pawn of fate? Or did he actually have any choice in his own downfall?
And this is what makes the play so powerful. It's this constant tug of war. On one side, yep, his fate was sealed by a prophecy before he was even born. But on the other, his true greatness, his heroism, comes from his free will. It's his relentless, stubborn choice to find the truth, no matter how awful it is. And then, he chooses to accept full responsibility by punishing himself. The philosopher Aristotle saw this play and noticed the incredible effect it has on the audience. And he gave it a name, catharsis. He said that by watching Oedipus's terrifying fall from grace, we get to experience pity and fear in a safe space. It purges those emotions from us, and we actually leave feeling kind of cleansed, even restored. And that right there is exactly why Aristotle called this play the perfect tragedy. We feel pity for this great man who was brought so low, and we feel this deep fear that, hey, maybe we're also blind to the most important truths about ourselves. It's like a vaccine for the soul, you know? It shows us the absolute worst-case scenario so we can hopefully navigate our own lives a little better.
Okay, let's zoom in on the structure of the play itself, because the way this story is built is pure genius, and it all leads to this unforgettable conclusion.
So the whole thing kicks off like a detective story. Seriously, it feels like a modern crime procedural. Oedipus is the brilliant ruler, and he's the lead investigator, dead set on finding the murderer of the last king so he can lift the plague that's destroying his city.
But as he starts peeling back the layers of this mystery, the whole investigation slowly, horribly, turns inward. The search for a killer becomes this terrifying journey of self-discovery. The public question, who did it, completely transforms into the deeply personal one, who am I?
And that is the core of why this story has lasted. It all boils down to that one single, terrifying and universal journey, the one we all have to take at some point. It's that shift from pointing the finger at someone else to looking right in the mirror. That switch from who did it to who am I is everything.
And get this, even the famous riddle of the Sphinx, the very thing Oedipus solved to become king in the first place, can be seen as this incredible piece of foreshadowing for his whole fate. There's this really fascinating modern theory that the riddle itself is a kind of taboo. Think about it. Riddles work by forcing connections between things that don't seem to belong together. So by solving it, Oedipus proved he was a guy who was willing to connect things that should really be kept separate, a trait that leads directly to his downfall in the real world.
The play ends with these just haunting words from the chorus. It's a final, sobering reminder to everyone watching. You can't really judge a life until it's over. Fortune can change in an instant. And knowledge? Well, knowledge can bring just as much pain as it does power.
And so, Oedipus is still a masterpiece, not just because it's about a man fulfilling a shocking prophecy. It's about that heroic, painful, and absolutely necessary human struggle to truly know ourselves, no matter what it costs. And it leaves us with a question that just echoes through the centuries. What's the real tragedy here? Is it avoiding suffering, or is it avoiding the truth?